We are creating dynamic customer journeys. So each of these segments in the market that AI is helping you to see and recognize is going to have a different part, a different dynamic journey, which will bring the player into the game environment.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of the SiGMA podcast. Let's call this part two. Part two because we've got Gege Gatt with us again, the CEO of EBO, and the first podcast we did with you was so successful and we had such positive feedback that getting you round for the second round was the natural consequence of all of that. So thank you for coming with us, for accepting our invitation and joining us today.
It's great to be here, Trevor. Thank you.
Thank you. We've discussed the program a bit at length. Yes, well, the podcast a bit at length. We're going to be talking a bit more on the gaming side now and how AI can influence the gaming side. So we spoke a lot about AI, how it came about, its tools, its efficiency. But AI in gaming. First question, how can AI help increase the audience of the product, of gaming itself, of the various verticals?
Well, there are four key themes that we should explore, Trev, and I think each one of them has some really important insights for this industry. Let's start off with the theme of personalization. So if you look at AI in any industry, what you see is this new capability we have to make sure that every game, that every member of the audience has a personalized experience. It's almost like having a recommendation engine for content, for game type, for interface, for promotions, based on the individual preference of every player. And we're seeing this personalization trend in a number of industries. I mean, more widely, if you look at entertainment. Did you know that Netflix will change its interface based on if you like one genre of movie versus another one? Because we know that the key insight in today's world is no longer that content is king, but relevance is king. Now, what that means is that gaming operators have this magnificent opportunity to structure the gameplay environment, to structure the entire ecosystem within which the player is introduced, to make it relevant to his or her particular nuanced interests. And that makes them feel valued and understood.
You're actually reminding me of something which was discussed earlier in my podcasting days around this time last year with Oliver De Bono, the CEO of Quantum Gaming, who have tried to adopt the Netflix model towards their own B2B delivery services. Right. How important would that be for players?
I think a platform is no longer relevant if it does not match the needs of today's market. And I don't only think that it's Oliver's point about the platform, I think we can think about the stage before the platform. So
what do you mean?
Which is the targeted marketing, right? Because we need to adopt users into a game environment. And how do you do that? Well, AI can hugely assist in the segmentation of the audience in a way which is far more efficient than today. So if you had to look at any industry, and gaming is no exception, we think of the audience as being one mass of user types which like the type of games we bring to the industry. Mm-hmm. But the truth is that that's a very naive understanding of how audiences work. Audiences need to be understood as being composed by different demographics, by different interests, by different orientations and KPIs, right? And what AI allows us to do is look at that mass of data that we have and segment it more efficiently. So the type of marketing promotions and activities which we create in the market are more prone to create a conversion rate, right? And conversion rates are the most useful KPI that we use to determine whether the marketing initiatives that we have are relevant and effective in the market. And I think the insight from this is that we are creating dynamic customer journeys. So each of these segments in the market that AI is helping you to see and recognize is going to have a different part, a different dynamic journey, which will bring the player into the game environment.
Okay, so let me understand this correctly, also for the benefit of who's watching us. Dynamic customer journey. So each journey is basically personalized, Gege, if I've understood you correctly.
That's right. We're moving into a world whereby every journey is going to be crafted for the requirement of that one player. So a certain type of high-value player goes for a bespoke campaign which is crafted for him and for her. And if you think of this as the power of generative AI, right? The ability to generate an infinite amount of content and campaigns. What AI is giving us is the muscle, the computing capability, which we never had before, to create a journey for every single player. Now, we have to be careful, right? Because the psychological impact of that is that we can create a highly addictive environment, and that's where RG comes in, right? So, and you know, we'll cover that too, right? But this is the opportunity which we have, right?
So, you mentioned 4 teams, and till now we've spoken about personalization. Right. Now, we've spoken about dynamic customer journey, and as you have explained it, I have seen not just an RG issue, but a compliance issue. And that has to be discussed. So, this is where the presenter doesn't often do this, but what do you prefer discussing next? The second team or the compliance or AG?
No,
you choose.
Let me close off just 2 more teams over here, because I think it can help the viewers of your podcast sort of look at these key opportunities in AI. I think if we had to extend this idea of the dynamic customer journey a little bit more, right? We framed it as being in the marketing phase. Let's now frame it in the context of loyalty. I think what AI does is it allows us to highly improve and look at the support and guidance that customer need post sign up, right? So if you had to think of the customer service industry, I mean, AI is changing this entirely. I mean, one of the projects that we have worked on at EBO with Stanleybet has seen that today there is far more AI resolution of issues than you have human resolution of issues.
When you talk about resolution, as in the fixing of problems,
customer support tickets.
Customer support issues.
So, right, customer support tickets are not merely, and the use of AI in this context is not merely a matter of cost optimization, Trev. I think this is a huge opportunity around user retention. Because when customer tickets remain unsolved, that leads to attrition. So what we look at when we create a dynamic journey for each customer in the service segment is we're avoiding attrition. We're giving a huge push forward to loyalty and retention. And of course, as our listeners will know, this is a huge KPI that we are often measured against. And maybe the insight from this, Trevor, is that AI is giving us the opportunity to create this new, like two-directional, bi-directional communication between the brand and the audience. And this is something which we never had before, certainly not in real time, certainly not in any language, certainly not at any time, certainly not across any channel, be it the web portal or an app or Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever. There is this new opportunity to have a scaled amount of conversations between the brand and the end user to make sure that not only is the ticket resolved, but actually that the loyalty is retained. Okay, 4th team, and we'll wrap this up, right? So I think if we had to...
And you need to run through them all again, because you've...
Right. So let's talk about, this generative AI function, Trev. So I think that what we've created in the last year through these new capabilities we have is the ability for marketeers in gaming to generate far more marketing content and far more personalized marketing content that they've ever been able to do in the history of marketing, right? Because what generative AI does is allows us to create text, images, blogs, videos, social media posts that attract and retain players and based on their individual needs.
So chat GPT be a form of generative AI?
Absolutely, right? So ChatGPT and other tools like Claude by Anthropic, and there are many other models out there, are capable to listen to your needs and generate based on that needs. And of course, game developers can connect these tool sets within their platforms and generate content for every user. Now, there is one big proviso, right? That, Trev...
We're both lawyers, so we should...
but generative AI might break the internet as we know it, right? So think of the internet as having three components, right? So you've got a block of content, Trev. Then you've got an algorithm between that content and you've got the user, right? You've got these three components: content, algorithm, user. Now, for the last 20 years, at least since internet has been the mainstay of our society, that box of content, all that content has been human generated, right? Blogs that you and I have written, and other people, and books and so on and so forth. With generative AI in the last year, we've been able to fill that content box to infinity, right? And I think the best example of that huge amount of increase of content has been Amazon's book publishing service. So it was obvious that a person is unlikely to publish more than one book every few months. It takes a while to research and write a book. Because of generative AI, people had started uploading onto Amazon's book publishing service dozens of books every single day, which shows the speed at which we could beat the average human in writing content. And now Amazon had to lock that down and only allows you to publish 3 books a day, which also is crazy, right? But this is the strength of generative AI. It allows you to scale up internet content in an incredible way. So whilst marketeers in gaming should use...
And that content is actually monetized.
So, of course, that's the big question, right? So if you're going to scale up content to infinity, does it become irrelevant? Does it mean that as users, we cannot distinguish anymore between what is good content and misinformation or disinformation? So I think we've got a few challenges ahead. But what's for sure is that if you're in gaming right now, if you're specifically looking at dynamic customer journeys and marketing content, I think the solution is to utilize generative AI so as to assist the functions of your organization in generating the right content.
Okay, so I actually have lost all guidance on what the time limit is right now, so hopefully the cameraman can then do me a sign with his hands and tell me how much time I have left. This is what happens when me and you start talking. I have 4 questions, and you know the order in which I had them, but I'm going to have to go into compliance, AML, and responsible gaming. Right. And I'm going to link this. Jesus notes. I have to link this with, again, what I consider one of the main takeaways of this podcast: dynamic customer journey. So this dynamic customer journey, it does make sense. And I like this phrase you have coined. But let's take, for example, the UK market, the British market. The UK GC has come down quite heavy on its licensees, with almost a shoot first, ask questions later. So the UK market is pretty compliance heavy, pretty responsible gaming heavy. And you gave a mention of the limitations of compliance and RG vis-a-vis the dynamic customer journey. So, how can AI ensure that all stakeholders are happy vis-a-vis the dynamic customer journey? So, the GC is happy that the operators are taking their responsibilities, but they're also happy that their players are protected, that the players who are playing on UK licensed websites are. And the same can be said then on the customers and on the actual operators.
Let's break this down into these 3 main components, Trev. So let's look at AML first, let's look at RG second, and let's look at compliance as sort of a crowning topic. I think what we need to recognize is the incredible power that AI has brought in our ability to run AML procedures. So let's just look at some science over here, Trev. So just to give you a bit of a sense of this strength that we now have. So AI is able to recognize one face, one profile, one person from 50 million others in less than 1 second. It's able to read and learn 30,000 academic papers in just a few seconds. That's something that would have taken a PhD most of his or her lifetime to complete.
If you don't mind me interrupting you here, me and you had a television program together where you shocked me by telling me that AI is currently being used to help find a cure of cancer.
Right.
Right, because it can read through 30,000 journals in few hours.
In a few seconds, right? And as we improve biological science...
Few seconds now.
It's a few seconds, right?
Well, last October you told me a few hours. So.
I mean, it's so the computing power we have is incredible, Trev, right? And I think if you frame this, not only from a biological science perspective, but in gaming, what that means is pattern recognition is easier than ever before.
Which is AML in itself. Which is investigating patterns.
Right? That is your definition. So I think that pattern recognition, pattern synthesis is the key strength that AI brings. I think it's not only a choice that game providers and operators have, I think it's a responsibility today to implement AI in your operational setup, because you've got the tool, which didn't exist before, to monitor transactions in real time to detect that level of suspicion.
So is there AI-run software assisting on AML compliance and fraud?
Absolutely. And not only is it available through third-party software which you license, but game operators today can go directly to the source. So here you're talking about companies like Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., and utilize models which they make available exactly for this function. So there's almost no excuse to not utilize AI in your operational sets. And I think what it means is that if you're a large game operator and your data sets are now scaling and exploding to the extent that human intervention becomes no longer feasible, I'm not saying it's not possible, you can employ an army of people, but operationally, obviously, there is a bit of a cost issue there.
And not everyone can spot the patterns in the same way.
Yes, and I think that is a really key point you make, Trev, because it's not only the efficiency of the operator in spotting problems, sometimes they have problems with bias. So human operators tend to be biased towards a particular ethnicity, race, gender, type of prayer.
It's very easy. When you have, for example, you're very active in the Italian market,
right,
and you have loads of accounts,
right,
you will tend to focus, at least experience has taught me,
yes,
anything south of Naples.
Right. So I think that bias could be problematic. Yes. And of course there's another shape of that bias, and that is familiarity. So as you become familiar with particular players or particular player types, your human operator tends to lower his or her guard.
Because they know who that player is, they think they know his.
Right.
Whereas in reality it could be someone who's actually testing the system, giving it some time, and then...
And what AI does, Trev, is exactly the opposite. It doesn't have familiarity. It doesn't have bias. And I think because of this, we can reduce the risk of financial crime in AML like never before. I think the second... Go ahead, Trev. Sorry.
Financial crime. Has law enforcement looked at AI?
Yes, so we're seeing two aspects of that.
And I'm not referring just to local. International.
Oh yes, well, I assume that was. So we sort of have these two levels that we look at when it comes to reducing the risk of financial crime and also the wider context of responsible gaming. So the first side of it is early identification, which already is something we don't have, but where we are going to, and that's the discussion which we should have, is actually predictive identification. Now there we have some ethical concerns, but let's unpack the first. I think what early identification means in the concept of RG is that with algorithmic capabilities, we can spot those particular patterns very early on, which are likely to develop problematic behavior. And by analyzing this activity and these patterns immediately, we can have a timely intervention. I mean, here in Malta, Kindred Group has published some content about this already, sort of starting to experiment with this type of early intervention before problematic gambling becomes a behavioral pattern. But where the industry is moving to, and now this is not just gambling, I think this is generally around law enforcement activity, is can we use AI to predict that a particular user cohort is very likely in the future to lead to irresponsible gaming
That would
activity.
reinvent the whole traffic light system you use in your customer risk assessments.
Entirely, right? Because it is predictive. But of course, the ethical and moral qualms over there
Yes.
are this user has actually not committed any crime or any offense or has not broken any type of regulation. So you are predicting that that might happen.
Actually, it sounds a bit like that scene from the Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report.
Right. We're in the Matrix here, Trev, right?
But even though we're in the Matrix, we have time constraints. I've only managed 2 out of the 4 questions. You know what that means. Part 3. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you here, Gege. Thank you to SiGMA and the entire team for making this podcast possible. And yes, we will have a 3rd episode with Gege Gatt to continue discussing the impact of AI vis-a-vis gaming, game development, and also compliance. Thank you so much, Gege.
It's great to be here, Trev. Thank you.